On a hot August dusk in old Edo, the city that would one day become Tokyo, a shopkeeper steps out of his doorway with a wooden pail and a bamboo dipper. He has nothing bolted to a wall, nothing that costs a single coin to switch on. He sweeps the dirt in front of his shop, then throws a long arc of water across the warm ground, and the air right there begins to cool. Up and down the street, his neighbors are doing the same thing. Damp stone, low evening light, a thin band of coolness you could stand inside. People had been doing this since at least the 1600s, and the strange part is not that it worked. The strange part is why we ever stopped. I am Kenji, and there is one detail in how that shopkeeper threw his water that almost everyone today gets backwards, the difference between cooling the air and just making a cloud of steam. Because here is what we reach for instead. The heat settles in around 7 in the evening, the apartment holds it like a closed oven, and your hand finds the remote for the air conditioner before any decision has really been made. For the worst week of summer, that is fair enough, and I run mine too. But look at what that machine quietly costs you across a season. Air conditioning is usually the single biggest reason the power bill swells from June through September. Across American homes, cooling eats up roughly a fifth of all the electricity a household burns in a year. And in the hot, humid parts of the country, it can swallow a quarter or more of everything a home spends on energy. That is the summer envelope people open on the counter, wince at, and quietly set back down. And what you are paying for is chilled air in a sealed box. Air that spills out every time a door opens, that you have to chill all over again the moment the sun comes back. You rent that coolness. You never get to keep it. Now set that beside what the shopkeeper was holding: a wooden bucket, a long-handled ladle, and water that, in his world, had very often already done a job once, the leftover bath water or rain caught off the eaves. A few dollars for the bucket and the dipper, paid once, good for life, and water you were going to pour down the drain anyway. Against a cooling bill that climbs into the tens and the hundreds of dollars over a summer, his side of the ledger is, near enough, nothing. Nobody took the bucket away from you. The cool was always free. It is just that a machine arrived that you could meter and sell, and the small free habit quietly stopped being worth anyone's while to pass down. Let me be straight with you from the start, because that is the whole point of this channel. A ladle of water will not cool your apartment, and anyone who tells you it replaces an air conditioner is selling you something. What it does is smaller and more useful than it sounds. It cools the air right around you, the doorway, the balcony, the few feet you actually stand in the morning and the evening, and it buys back the cool hour before you reach for the remote. Done wrong, it does almost nothing, which is exactly why so many people try it once and never bother again. So before you file uchimizu away as a charming old custom, stay with me. This is not folklore. Tokyo went out and put a thermometer on it, with hundreds of thousands of people sprinkling water on the same hot day. And the number they got back is why a 300-year-old habit is quietly coming back. In my grandmother's house, none of this ever needed measuring. It was just what you did at the doorway when the sun dropped. Go back to that shopkeeper, because the doorway he was wetting tells you almost everything. Edo in the 1700s was already one of the largest cities on Earth, more than 1 million people along a maze of wooden houses and narrow lanes. And outside nearly every door, the ground was bare dirt. Under the summer sun, that dirt turned to powder, and every cartwheel and wooden sandal kicked it up into a fine grit that drifted in through the open shop fronts. So the day began the same way at every threshold. You swept the ground with a stiff broom, then took up the bucket and the dipper and laid water over it to hold the dust down and take the edge off the heat. Nobody ordered this. It was simply what a decent person did at their own door, morning and evening, until the whole lane went dark and damp together. In my grandmother's house, far from any city, this had worn down to a single evening habit she never named. She would fill a low bucket at the outdoor tap, carry it to the worn stone step, and tip the dipper across the ground in slow arcs until the stone went almost black. The cicadas screaming, the light going amber, that sharp mineral smell of water on warm rock, and the doorway suddenly kinder than the baked road. I thought every grandmother did this. It was years before I learned it had a name and a history 3 centuries deep. And here is what surprised me when I went digging. The cooling was only ever half of it. The other half was courtesy. Before a guest arrived, you wet the path and the entrance, which settled the dust off their clothes, cooled the approach, and said, without a word, "This place has been freshened for you." That gesture runs straight back through the tea ceremony, where the host sprinkles water along the garden stones just before the guests come through, and back further still into Shinto, where water cast on the ground cleanses a space and marks it apart. So the shopkeeper at dusk was doing 3 jobs with 1 ladle. He was settling the dust, cooling the air, and keeping a courtesy already ancient when he was born. But a pleasant wet doorstep proves nothing on its own. I wanted a number, and so did Tokyo. In the summer of 2003, a coalition of environmental groups launched a public experiment they named Mission Uchimizu. The idea was almost comically plain. Get a huge number of people to step outside at one agreed moment on a brutal hot day, sprinkle water on the streets together, and measure whether a city could cool itself by hand. On the 25th of August that year, an estimated 340,000 people did exactly that across Tokyo, many in summer yukata, throwing the water from old wooden dippers. And they did not use the clean tap. They used collected rainwater, leftover bath water, even the drip-off air conditioners, because wasting fresh drinking water on the pavement would have broken the whole point. At 4 sites around the city, researchers and schoolchildren measured the air before and after. On average, it dropped by about 1 degree Celsius. 1 degree in the open air of a baking megacity, moved by nothing but water and a few 100,000 pairs of hands. And it did not stay small. The next summer it spread nationwide, and within a couple of years the count had climbed into the millions in Osaka, Nagoya, Fukuoka, and beyond. The engineers ran the numbers too. Japan's Public Works Research Institute estimated that coordinated sprinkling across a vast stretch of central Tokyo could pull the air down by something like 2 degrees. And years later, a team at a university in the Netherlands laid a dense grid of sensors over a single patch of paving and tracked exactly how the air above wet stone behaves. They confirmed the cooling is real, and they turned up the one clue that explains why so many beginners feel nothing. We will come straight back to that clue. So whether uchimizu works is settled. People with thermometers settled it. The question that changes what you do on your own hot balcony is why it works. Why does a little water on warm ground steal heat from the air above it? Because once that clicks, you will know exactly when to do it, where to do it, and the one mistake that ruins it for nearly everyone who tries. The answer is a piece of physics so ordinary, your own body uses it every day. It is called evaporative cooling, and the engine under it is the latent heat of vaporization. Water can sit as a liquid or lift off as invisible vapor. And to make that jump, each bit of water has to absorb a surprising amount of energy. It cannot float away on its own. It has to seize that energy as heat from whatever it is touching. So when you spread a thin film of water across a sun-baked stone, the water immediately starts pulling heat from 2 places to fuel its escape. It pulls heat up out of the stone, and it pulls heat out of the thin layer of air pressed against the surface. That heat is not destroyed, it is carried off, locked inside the rising vapor. And what it leaves behind, the stone and the air just above it, is genuinely cooler than a moment before. You are not cooling the ground by wetting it, the way a damp cloth feels cool on your neck. You are cooling it by driving the water off. The evaporation is the engine, the drying is the cooling. And here is the part that changes how you see your own balcony. This is the very same process running inside your air conditioner. In that humming box on the wall, a working fluid is forced to evaporate, and as it turns to vapor, it drinks heat out of the room's air, and a fan blows the cooled air back at you. Your refrigerator runs on it, your own skin runs on it, every time sweat lifts off you in a breeze. The shopkeeper throwing water on his doorstep was running a tiny, hand-powered, no-cost version of the very machine that now dominates your summer bill. He just never had to plug it in, and no one could meter it. The cool was always free. Knowing the engine tells you one condition you cannot break. The cooled air over your wet stone is thin, and in dead still sealed air it just pools there, grows damp, and the cooling stalls. It has to be allowed to move. A light breeze peels that cool layer off the ground and carries it to you while sweeping the humid air away so fresh evaporation can keep running. So uchimizu always paired with open windows and a draft through the house. A sealed room with the windows shut gets you almost nothing because the one thing the physics needs, moving air, is the thing you have taken away. If recovering this kind of plain, working knowledge is something you want more of, subscribe. And I will keep bringing you one old method at a time. Now let me hand you the method itself, because this is the part you can do tonight. It comes down to 4 things: when, where, what water, and how much. When. This is the heart of it. You sprinkle in the cool of the day, early morning or the back half of the evening, when the sun is low or gone and the ground is in shade. Never the blazing middle of the afternoon. Hold that picture. Low sun, shaded ground, cooling air. I will tell you why in a moment, because that is the mistake. Where? You want a surface the day has baked, and that holds a film of water long enough to evaporate slowly. Stone, concrete, brick, packed earth, garden gravel, a balcony floor, an entry step, a patio, a path. These soak up the day's heat and radiate it back all evening, and that is the heat you are canceling. A carpet or a sealed indoor floor is the wrong target. This is an outdoor habit. What water? In keeping with the people who built it, you do not run the clean tap. You use water that has already lived a life, the leftover bath water, rain caught in a barrel, even the condensation off an air conditioner. Cooling the pavement is not worth wasting drinking water on, and reused water here is exactly how it was meant to be done. How much? A thin, even film that just darkens the surface, no more. The urge is to drench it, but the physics does not pay out that way. Past a light wetting, the surplus runs off or pools, and a puddle evaporates slowly and mostly just loads the air with humidity. A thin film over a wide area, topped up when it dries, beats a flood. Cover the ground, do not drown it. The old tool is a bucket and a long-handled dipper thrown in low flat arcs, but an ordinary watering can does the same on a balcony. Which brings the detail I promised in the first minute, the mistake that has most first-timers try this once, feel nothing, and quit for good. It is the timing. Picture the eager beginner. They hear water cools the air, so on the hottest, brightest afternoon, sun straight overhead, pavement scorching, they fling a bucket across the patio and wait for relief. They get the opposite. On ground that hot, in sun that strong, the water does not evaporate in a slow, heat-stealing sigh. It flashes off almost the instant it lands. Up comes a gout of hot steam, the humidity spikes, the air turns thick and muggy and worse than before, and any cooling is gone in seconds. They stand there sweating in a cloud of their own making and decide the whole thing is a myth. But it is no myth. They ran the engine wrong. Remember that Netherlands study with the grid of sensors. The strongest cooling of all came when the water went down in the shade, not in blazing sun. The slow evaporation that actually pulls heat from the air needs cooler conditions. Throw water on sun-blasted stone, and you skip straight to making steam. Lay it on shaded ground in the cool of the morning or evening, and it lingers, evaporates slowly, and draws the heat out the way it is meant to. That is the difference between cooling the air and making a cloud of steam. The shopkeeper did not throw his water at noon. He threw it at dawn and dusk on shaded ground, and that timing was the whole method. Now the honest accounting, because honesty is why you should trust any of this. Let me be plain about what uchimizu will not do. It will not cool your house. A film of water on the ground cools the air right above it and the space close around it, the doorway, the patio, the balcony, the few feet you actually stand in. It does not reach into a sealed room and chill the whole place the way the wall unit does. Anyone who tells you a bucket of water replaces an air conditioner is selling you something. The second limit is humidity, straight out of the physics. Evaporation only cools well when the air still has room to take on more water vapor. On a dry evening, the cooling runs strong. On a thick, muggy night, the air is closer to full, the water lifts off grudgingly, and the effect narrows. Japanese summers are famously humid, and it still earns its keep there, but only with strict timing, shaded ground, and moving air. The muggier your climate, the more those details stop being optional. And a little common sense at ground level. Wet stone is slick, so keep it off the steps where someone could skid, and use water that is reasonably fresh and clean, not something left going sour in a bucket for a week. So here is the honest size of it. Uchimizu takes the sting out of the heat in the patch of the world you actually occupy, morning and evening, for the price of water you were going to pour away. No machine, no miracle. It buys back the cool hour on the balcony, lets the thermostat sit a notch higher or the unit stay dark a while longer on the evenings around the worst heat. And across a long summer, that restraint is a real number on a real bill. Which leaves one question. If a city of thermometers can prove it, why did we forget it? Not because of a villain in a boardroom. No one banned the bucket. You cannot patent a ladle of water, and you cannot bolt a meter onto a habit. The air conditioner can be designed, branded, financed, and billed to you every month for life. So that is the thing that got the showroom and the advertising, and the free habit simply had no one whose job it was to keep it alive. The cool was always free. We just stopped being reminded of it, one summer at a time, until a practice 3 centuries deep nearly slipped out of living memory. That is why I make these. The point was never to talk you out of your air conditioner. It is to put the bucket back in your hand. So this knowledge does not die quietly in our generation the way it nearly has. The next time the evening heat presses in and your hand drifts to the remote, remember there is an older move, one that costs nothing. Try it once properly on shaded ground at dusk with the windows open. Then show someone younger how it is done, because passing it on is the only way a thing like this survives. And tell me how it goes, because I want to know. Pour the water on your step or balcony some evening this week and leave a comment with the one thing that matters most, how the air actually felt and what corner of the world you are in. A balcony in Phoenix and a doorway in Georgia are different tests. And tell me one more thing. Did anyone in your family keep a habit like this, some small free trick against the heat that everyone knew and no one ever wrote down? If you want more of these, the plain old methods people used before the bills arrived, subscribe and come along. There are more of us doing this than you would think. putting the practical knowledge back together piece by piece, and the heat will not last forever. When it breaks and the cold comes hunting for you instead, the power company will be waiting with the heating bill, and there is an answer to that one too. The next method is the kotatsu, a low table under a heavy quilt that kept whole families warm for centuries without ever heating a single empty room. Same family of knowledge, same few dollar logic. Until then, save your water, wet your stone in the cool of the evening, and remember that the cool was always free.